During World War II, death and destruction became part of daily life, but beneath the battlefield chaos, stranger things were happening. Entire battalions vanished without a trace. Secret Nazi trains disappeared into the earth. Radios began broadcasting voices that shouldn't exist. Even high-ranking SS officers conducted rituals they swore could manipulate time itself. These stories weren't just erased from history, they were buried. What really happened during the war that no one dared to explain? Let's uncover the terrifying truth. Welcome to Unsolved Archives, where we delve into the hidden, the mysterious, and the unanswered. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your insight could be the key to unlocking the truth. The Vanishing Battalion of Langemarck. In the early summer of 1940, as Nazi Germany's blitzkrieg tore through Western Europe, the French army was collapsing under the weight of speed and surprise. Troops were scattered, communication lines shredded, and panic began to bleed through the ranks. But among the chaos, one mystery would grow into a legend whispered in veterans' reunions and never resolved by official record: the disappearance of an entire battalion stationed near the rural outskirts of Langemarck, Belgium. The 3rd Battalion of the 18th French Infantry Division had been deployed to a defensive line northeast of Ypres, a region still scarred by the trench horrors of World War I. It was an area of significance, both strategically and historically. Their orders were simple: hold the wooded perimeter and await reinforcement. The soldiers dug in, setting up makeshift bunkers and scattered listening posts in the forested terrain. For the first few days, reports from the battalion remained routine: occasional skirmishes, night patrols, sightings of German reconnaissance units. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, without warning, the updates stopped. The last radio transmission came at 3:17 a.m. on May 22, 1940. It was brief, chaotic. A coded alert was sent, repeating the phrase, "black wind through the trees," requesting immediate, before cutting off mid-sentence. Command attempted to re-establish contact, assuming a communications issue. Units nearby were contacted, but none had visual confirmation of the battalion's location. By midday, a scout team was sent in to investigate. What they found, or didn't find, would puzzle military officials for decades. The site was eerily pristine. No bodies. No weapons. Not even a single spent bullet casing. The trench lines remained intact, beds still rolled tight, rations uneaten, fires cold but freshly ash-covered. There were signs the battalion had been present only hours before. But the 568 men who composed it were gone. Even more unsettling were the animal carcasses found nearby: birds, deer, even wild boars, dead without wounds, their bodies twisted as if caught mid-movement. The trees surrounding the position had changed, according to several witnesses. Local Belgian farmers who were familiar with the land reported that the forest looked wrong, though they struggled to describe it. Some claimed the tree lines had shifted. One officer reported his compass spinning wildly for several minutes before stabilizing again. Others noted a strange hum in the air, low and rhythmic, like the distant churn of machinery underground. But no machines were ever found. French High Command chalked the incident up to desertion under duress, an explanation that didn't sit right with anyone involved in the recovery. Desertion en masse, leaving everything behind, made no strategic or logical sense. And if they had deserted, why did not a single soldier turn up elsewhere, alive or dead? In 1946, a post-war investigative team composed of Allied officers and historians attempted to revisit the site. By then, the forest had regrown significantly, and the trenches were mostly filled in. Still, strange things were reported: faulty recording equipment, lost time during field operations, and one soldier who went missing for 5 hours only to be found sleepwalking and muttering in Old Flemish, despite being a native Parisian who had never studied the language. Declassified documents released decades later showed that both British and German intelligence had been aware of the Langemarck disappearance. The Germans, too, had reported unusual atmospheric interference in the area and had marked the surrounding forest as a no-go zone in their maps. A captured German officer told his interrogators that his men avoided the Langemarck woods entirely. When pressed, he simply said, "That place doesn't belong to any side." Speculation has ranged wildly over the years. Some believe the battalion stumbled into an experimental Nazi weapon, possibly a directed energy field or time-altering device. Others suggest more esoteric causes, dimensional rifts, ancient battleground curses, or even collective psychological breakdown. A few fringe researchers link the event to the occult experiments supposedly conducted by the SS elsewhere in Europe. But one theory persists in underground circles. It concerns something called Zone Bluey, or the Blue Zone, a rumored area in northern Europe said to exist outside normal geography and time. A place where war bleeds into myth, where reality folds in on itself. Several disappearances throughout history have been loosely attributed to this zone. The Lost Legion of Teutoburg, the vanishing Soviet scouts in World War I, and now, perhaps, the 3rd Battalion of Langemarck. The French military quietly erased the incident from its official history. The soldiers were listed as Kia with no further details. Families were told vague stories about their loved ones dying during heavy fighting, despite no such battles occurring in the Langemarck sector during that time. Today, the area is little more than farmland and scattered woods. A small, unmarked stone sits near where the trenches once ran, rumored to have been placed by a retired colonel who never accepted the official story. Locals still avoid the woods at night. They say you can hear boots crunching leaves and low voices calling names no one recognizes. A few believe the battalion is still there, trapped in a loop of unending preparation for a battle that never came. Hitler's missing train, the Gold of Breslau mystery. As the Third Reich crumbled in the final months of World War II, chaos consumed every corner of Nazi Germany. Cities were burning, the Soviet army was closing in from the east, and entire divisions were fleeing westward to surrender to the Allies instead. Amid the ruins of Hitler's empire, desperate men took desperate actions. One of the most enduring mysteries of that time surrounds an armored Nazi train that left the city of Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, on a cold night in January 1945. It was said to carry not just gold and stolen artwork, but blueprints, weapons, and secrets meant to never fall into Allied hands. And then it disappeared. The train, according to surviving manifests and German railway logs, consisted of 12 cars, 2 for troops, 3 for equipment, 2 marked Wissenschaft, science, 1 refrigerated, and 4 heavily fortified with reinforced steel plating. Eyewitnesses at the station claimed SS guards surrounded the platform and forced local railway workers to turn away during the loading process. One engineer, later found dead under suspicious circumstances, told his wife that he'd seen crates bearing the eagle and swastika alongside markings he didn't recognize, possibly tied to the mysterious Ahnenerbe organization, the occult research arm of the SS. The train departed Breslau at 2:06 a.m. on January 27, 1945. Its destination was never made public, but decoded messages intercepted by British intelligence suggested it was bound for the Austrian Alps, possibly toward the Berghof region or deep into the tunnel networks near the Salzkammergut. After that night, however, no further signal or sighting of the train was ever recorded. When Soviet troops captured Breslau days later, they interrogated every remaining railway official and SS officer they could find. None had an answer. Some claimed the train had been redirected. Others said it had never existed. But when a Soviet armored division retraced the tracks weeks later, something strange became clear. Roughly 40 kilometers southwest of Breslau, the rails ended abruptly at what appeared to be a landslide, or possibly a man-made cave-in. Further investigation revealed a hidden switch track that led into a disused mining tunnel. That entrance had been collapsed with explosives. The Soviets tried to dig it out, but strange occurrences halted the effort. Several soldiers went missing during excavation. Tunneling equipment malfunctioned. Even dogs brought to sniff out explosives refused to enter the tunnel. Eventually, the site was abandoned and sealed off by Soviet command. Over the decades, the legend of Hitler's ghost train grew. Polish and German historians unearthed scattered references to secret convoys and last-minute treasure evacuations from the Eastern Front. One decrypted Allied document referred to Project Kronos and listed the Breslau departure as the final movement. Theories multiplied that the train carried gold looted from the Hungarian treasury, that it held art stolen from Jewish families and hidden in fear of post-war justice, that inside one of the cars was a prototype wonder weapon Germany had never had time to deploy. In the 1990s, with the fall of the Iron Curtain, a renewed wave of treasure hunters descended on southern Poland. Ground-penetrating radar scans near Wewelsburg detected anomalies beneath the earth, long, narrow voids consistent with train tunnels. Excavation began, but was halted again by strange resistance from local authorities. Rumors swirled that something was buried there too dangerous to reveal. That Polish intelligence had found a portion of the train and sealed it back up. That the gold wasn't the true prize at all, but rather the contents of car number 6, the science car. What was in it? Some suggest it contained the schematics for the Nazi Bell, a secret gravitational propulsion device tied to the occult and advanced physics. Others believe the train carried uranium intended for a last-ditch nuclear weapon, possibly explaining why Allied archives on the incident remain redacted even today. Adding to the mystery are declassified CIA and MI6 records that reference Operation Harvest, a post-war effort to intercept former SS officers believed to have knowledge of the train's fate. At least 2 were captured. One died during interrogation, the other vanished from custody under unclear circumstances. Even today, official German and Polish records make no mention of a train with that configuration leaving Breslau. And yet the testimonies continue. An old man in Austria claimed he helped build a bunker train track in the Totes Mountains. A retired Polish soldier swore he saw 2 flatbed railcars hauled out of the woods in the dead of night in 1946, surrounded by American officers in unmarked uniforms. None of these accounts have ever been confirmed. In 2015, 2 treasure hunters claimed to have located the buried train near Ksiez Castle. Their claims made international headlines and were quickly suppressed. The Polish government cordoned off the site, citing public safety. No official statement was given about what, if anything, was recovered. Some researchers say the men were paid off. Others believe the find was real, but too politically volatile to reveal. Whether hidden by secrecy, buried by rubble, or consumed by something far stranger, the train remains one of WWII's most haunting enigmas. It was a symbol of a dying empire's desperation, but also a puzzle that refuses to fade from history. What began as a simple transport mission has become a magnet for conspiracy, national pride, and the darker obsessions of war. Somewhere beneath the soil of Europe, in darkness and silence, the train may still be waiting. The Ghost Radio of Stalingrad. In the depths of the brutal Battle of Stalingrad, arguably the bloodiest and most psychologically crushing confrontation of World War II, soldiers on both sides witnessed horrors beyond imagination. The city was reduced to rubble. The air reeked of fire, blood, and rot. Men fought and died in freezing temperatures, living like rats in burned-out buildings and sewer tunnels. Yet amid all the human madness, another phenomenon began to surface, one that neither the Soviets nor the Germans could fully explain. Strange radio signals broadcasting from nowhere, carrying messages no one could trace, in voices no one recognized. The earliest reports came from Soviet communications officers in late October 1942. While trying to tune in to Central Command frequencies, they picked up a faint signal on a band that hadn't been in use for years. It began as static, harmless white noise in the middle of the chaos, but then patterns emerged. First, a series of clicks like Morse code, but too fast and inconsistent to decipher. Then came music. A slow, dragging violin solo played in an unfamiliar scale, with a distortion that made it sound underwater. Minutes later, a voice crackled in, low and mechanical. The words were in Russian, but the dialect was archaic, pre-revolutionary, almost poetic. "The earth bleeds from its mouth," the voice said. "The winter will remember every name." The signal vanished as quickly as it appeared. At first, Soviet officers assumed it was some form of German psychological warfare, a way to disorient troops, perhaps mimicking spiritual or ghostly messages to unsettle their morale. But when intercepted German radio logs were reviewed, it turned out their side was hearing it too. A Wehrmacht radioman captured in the Red October factory district told his interrogators about Die Stimme des Schmerzes, the voice of pain. He said it came only after midnight, and that soldiers would sit in silence, heads tilted toward the static, as if in a trance. The signal always started the same way: a low hum, followed by the sound of distant marching boots, then a voice reciting names, hundreds of them. Most were unrecognizable. But then, one night, the names changed. One soldier heard the name of his dead brother, who had died in Poland 2 years prior. Another German swore he heard his own name, followed by a date in the future, his death date, which came true exactly 1 week later in a Soviet ambush. There was never a single origin point. Soviet radio engineers triangulated it to a bombed-out cathedral in the city center. But when a squad was dispatched to investigate, the structure was empty. No transmitters, no power sources, no trace of human presence. The equipment brought to detect electromagnetic fields overloaded and melted. The team returned shaken and refused to go near the site again. Even stranger were the broadcasts in languages no one could identify. Some Soviet officers recorded a signal they described as a choir of children singing backwards, layered over a throbbing mechanical sound, like an old steam engine running underwater. A captured SS signal technician once claimed the frequency matched a series of abandoned experimental bands used by the German Navy in World War I for deep signal resonance, a technology meant to transmit messages through the Earth's crust. The project was scrapped due to unforeseen consequences. As winter deepened, the transmissions became more frequent and disturbing. One Soviet major, according to his diary, said he was hearing the signal without even using a radio. "It's in the pipes now," he wrote. "In the wind. In the teeth of the city. It knows we're listening." Then, in late January 1943, just days before the German 6th Army surrendered, a massive burst of white noise blanketed all frequencies for 6 minutes. When it cleared, every Soviet and German radio station within a 10-kilometer radius caught the same thing. A single voice, male, calm, emotionless. It spoke only once. "You have made a hole in time. Close it, or be buried inside." And then, nothing. The voice never returned. After the German surrender, Soviet teams swept the city for any unusual technology. None was found. The cathedral was destroyed in a final air raid, erasing any chance of examining it again. All recordings of the signals were confiscated by Soviet intelligence. Most of the technicians who documented the phenomenon were reassigned or disappeared entirely. In the decades following the war, a few of the recordings resurfaced, bootlegged onto reel-to-reel tapes that circulated among Cold War radio enthusiasts. One of these tapes, examined in the 1970s by a British shortwave researcher, reportedly contained a segment of the strange violin music followed by whispering voices that, when slowed down, were revealed to be speaking in Latin. The phrase most clearly understood, mortui loquuntur, the dead speak. To this day, no consensus exists on what the Stalingrad ghost radio truly was. Some say it was simply the byproduct of stress, madness, and atmospheric distortion caused by relentless artillery fire. Others point to wartime experiments with early signal-based weaponry, or to the Nazi obsession with acoustic physics and the idea that sound could affect the mind and body in unseen ways. A few insist it was something else entirely, something ancient awakened by the blood-soaked soil, feeding off death, using the leftover technology of man to whisper back from whatever lies beyond. Ham radio operators occasionally report strange signals from the Stalingrad region, usually around the anniversary of the battle's end. Most dismiss it as coincidence. But once in a while, one of them records a voice. And sometimes, it says your name. The Black Squadron, that flew before the war began. 2 years before the first shots of World War II rang out across Europe, the skies above the continent were already haunted by something unexplained. Between 1937 and 1939, reports began to surface from several countries, France, Poland, England, and even the Netherlands, of strange aircraft flying at night in tight, disciplined formation. These planes didn't match any known Air Force design. They were always painted a deep matte black, carried no insignias or lights, and never responded to radio contact. At first, military officials in affected nations dismissed the sightings. They blamed civilian imagination, weather balloons, or aircraft from neighboring countries that had strayed off course. But as the number of reports grew, and came from trained observers like pilots, radar crews, and ground staff, it became harder to deny that something strange was unfolding in European airspace. In March 1938, a French reconnaissance team near Reims tracked 7 black aircraft flying silently at 10,000 feet. The French sent a squadron of Block MB.210 bombers to intercept. Within minutes, the black squadron vanished into heavy clouds, no radar contact, no visual confirmation after the initial sighting. The French command labeled it a phantom formation and shelved the report. But the incidents continued. British home defense pilots began encountering similar formations near the southeastern coast. In one alarming episode in July 1938, a group of Royal Air Force Spitfires was scrambled to intercept what radar labeled as a non-transmitting group of high-altitude craft. When they reached the estimated location, all they saw was a formation of 9 black planes, triangular in design, with no visible cockpit or engine exhaust. As the RAF planes approached, the black craft turned as one, forming a perfect V formation, then accelerated out of visual range in less than 10 seconds. What made the event even more baffling was the effect it had on onboard instrumentation. Compasses spun. Radios died. One pilot described a low, vibrating hum that resonated in his bones for days after. Debriefings were intense, but ultimately, the pilots were told to forget what they saw. Similar incidents occurred over the skies of Warsaw, Brussels, and Prague. Some were visible to the public, especially during full moons, prompting brief newspaper coverage. But in each case, stories were quickly retracted or buried, often citing aviation training errors or optical illusions caused by atmospheric distortion. By 1939, as tensions mounted across the continent, speculation among intelligence circles grew darker. Were these some kind of early German spy planes? Prototypes? Unmarked recon aircraft designed to test border responses before a full invasion? Then came a report from Switzerland that stunned even the skeptics. In late 1938, near the Jura Mountains, a Swiss military observatory recorded a black formation hovering completely motionless at 15,000 feet for over 6 minutes. The skies were clear, the air dead still. Using telescopic film equipment, the observatory captured several seconds of footage, blurred and grainy, but unmistakably showing 6 large, black aircraft arranged in a circle, nose to tail, not moving. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the aircraft disappeared. No descent, no acceleration. They simply winked out of sight, one by one. The film was confiscated days later by a German diplomatic envoy. That incident marked the final known appearance of the Black Squadron. By September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, the skies were full of bombers and fighters, and the world had entered full-scale war. But the strange formations that haunted Europe in the quiet before the storm were never seen again. After the war, Allied intelligence conducted joint investigations into pre-war aerial anomalies. One declassified report compiled by MI6 and OSS analysts includes references to pre-combat phantom operations and notes that certain patterns suggest reconnaissance behavior not tied to any known Axis or Allied effort. Speculation exploded in the post-war years. Some conspiracy theorists tied the sightings to Nazi secret weapons programs, projects like Die Glock, the supposed anti-gravity bell device. Others proposed more exotic explanations, time-traveling aircraft, extraterrestrial observation craft, or even manifestations of wartime trauma echoing backward in time. But perhaps the most chilling theory came from a little-known transcript discovered in 1994, buried in Soviet archives. It recorded the debriefing of a captured German scientist who had worked on experimental aircraft radar at Peenemünde. He claimed that in early 1939, his team picked up signals, high-frequency emissions, coming not from enemy aircraft, but from unknown origins at high altitude. When his team tried to locate the source, they found themselves tracking a moving absence, as he put it, a blank spot that erased signal as it moved. He believed the black aircraft were not German, British, or even real in the traditional sense. They weren't machines, he said, according to the file. They were echoes, shadows of something that had already seen everything. We called them Die Verboten, the harbingers. If true, the idea of a black squadron, silently watching from above as Europe inched toward destruction becomes even more unsettling. Not only were they unknown, maybe they were never meant to interfere. Only observe. Only record. And then vanish. The secret that died at Wewelsburg Castle. In the quiet forested hills of Westphalia stands Wewelsburg Castle, a stone fortress shaped in a near-perfect triangle, its towers rising like dark sentinels above the landscape. To the average passerby, it might seem like just another old German castle, medieval, austere, even beautiful. But beneath its cobbled walkways and beneath its foundations lies one of the most disturbing, secretive chapters of the Third Reich's dark legacy. Wewelsburg was more than a castle. To Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and architect of the Holocaust, it was destined to be the spiritual and ideological heart of a new Nazi world order. Himmler poured enormous resources into its renovation starting in 1934, obsessively reshaping its architecture to match the occult ideals of the SS. Every corner, symbol, and stone had a purpose. But what went on inside its walls, especially in the last years of the war, remains one of World War II's most enduring mysteries. Officially, Wewelsburg was a training and retreat center for SS officers. But documents discovered after the war suggest something else entirely. Himmler envisioned the castle as a sanctum of arcane knowledge and metaphysical experimentation, a place where the past, present, and future could be reshaped by those worthy enough to wield power over history itself. The castle's north tower was sealed off from most personnel. Only the highest-ranking SS officers were permitted entry. Inside was a circular chamber known as the Obergruppenfürsel, the Hall of Supreme Leaders. Its black marble floor bore a 12-spoked sunwheel, what later came to be called the Black Sun, a symbol with no clear origin in Germanic tradition. The walls were built to amplify sound, and the chamber had no visible heating system, yet stayed unnaturally warm during the winter. It was in this tower that rumors say Himmler and a handful of his inner circle performed bizarre rituals, invoking ancient gods, channeling energies from long-dead empires, and seeking communion with what he referred to in his letters as the unseen architects. Prisoners from nearby camps were sometimes brought to the castle and never seen again. One document found in a partially burned archive refers cryptically to vocal frequency transmutation trials and genetic memory activation. Inmates who escaped the adjacent Niederhagen concentration camp whispered of being forced into the castle for mind trials. One man, later found dead in a mental hospital in the 1950s, claimed he was placed in a pitch-black room while an SS officer repeated phrases in Old Norse over a speaker system. He swore that after hours of this, he began to hallucinate not memories, but lives. Visions of being a warrior in 10th century Scandinavia, a Roman centurion, and then a Neolithic shaman wandering under northern stars. It sounds like madness, but after the war, Allied intelligence teams were dispatched to Wewelsburg to investigate. What they found was both disturbing and incomplete. The castle had been partially destroyed, by design. Just days before Germany's surrender, SS officers detonated charges beneath the North Tower, collapsing part of it into rubble. But certain pieces survived. In a hidden lower chamber, investigators found an octagonal pit lined with black obsidian tiles. Embedded into the walls were strange metallic fragments, unlike any known alloy, and inscriptions in runes that didn't match Norse, Gothic, or any documented script. More than one officer involved in the investigation would later die under unusual circumstances. Colonel James Atwell of U.S. Army Intelligence, who led the first post-war team into Wewelsburg, died in a house fire the night before he was to testify to Congress about his findings. His notes were never recovered. What really happened at Wewelsburg remains a matter of heated debate among historians, conspiracy theorists, and occult researchers. Some say it was all symbolic, ritual theater meant to bolster the SS warped mythology. Others believe it was an early attempt at psychological manipulation and mind control, experiments that would be continued later under CIA programs like MKUltra. But the more fringe voices, the ones that keep their archives in locked safes and their sources anonymous, claim something else entirely. That Himmler's inner circle was attempting to pierce the boundary between the world as we know it and something older, colder, and vastly more alien. Not aliens in the science fiction sense, but forces buried under the foundations of time, entities that whispered through bloodlines, ruins, and forgotten words. A letter discovered in 1987 from a German anthropologist assigned to Wewelsburg in 1942 describes a day of great silence, when the sun-wheel chamber was sealed from within for 3 days. During this time, all communications from the castle ceased. Guards posted outside heard low chanting, screams, then a sudden, deep vibration, felt through the ground itself, that caused birds to drop dead across a nearby field. When the chamber was opened again, 3 officers were missing. No explanation was ever given. The survivors were transferred to the Eastern Front and listed as killed in action within months. Since the end of the war, strange things have continued to happen at Wewelsburg. Tourists report headaches, time loss, and hallucinations inside the rebuilt sections. A television crew filming a documentary in 1991 lost all audio from their equipment while inside the sun-wheel chamber, only to find, upon later playback, a faint whispering in reverse German, saying, "You are not meant to be here." Wewelsburg today stands as a museum and memorial. But there are doors in the North Tower that remain locked. Authorities say they lead nowhere, that they are sealed for safety. And yet late at night, locals say they sometimes see a single light burning from a window in the highest tower, one that has no floor beneath it, no stairs leading up. A light that pulses, like a signal. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?